Hey everybody, Jessie here, and hanging in there today. It's a great day actually out here. Found this great little wooded spot not far from where I live, and I wanted to share through a demonstration today a little bit more, because one of the big questions that I get asked a lot, a whole lot, is, hey, you know, what is this whole thing about parallel lives, multiple incarnations, multiple dimensions? What happens when we leave this earth? What happens when we're incarnating into earth or an existence or a lifestyle? And so I thought this could be a great demonstration to just maybe help bring some of this home, as well as some other principles that I oftentimes do talk about. So this month's video, hopefully this is going to bring, I don't know, some more clarity or some more insight to things, because when we're in this third dimension, we really can get distracted by things around us. I mean, sometimes the distractions are great, right? It's beautiful, right? It's beautiful in nature and things like that, and those are some great distractions. But then sometimes we get some other distractions and we kind of get the blinders on and we forget a lot of things when we incarnate. And so one of the things is this bottle here, I'm going to use this to actually represent where we start, where we go when we leave this existence. And as you can see, there's, well, maybe you can't see, but there is some water in here. And water is going to be my example today, because I think it's a great example of how things are fluid. It's a great example of soul and spirit in many ways. And as a result of that, it gives us a good idea. So we start in this wholeness, for example. We start as this whole piece of things. But then what happens is that the wholeness recognizes where things get out of balance. And while on one hand everything is perfect, of course, and there's no right or wrong or things like that, one of the key things to divine presence, God, whatever term you want to use in there, is this concept of wholeness. And wholeness is all-encompassing. It's going to bring in all these different pieces, all these different aspects. And hopefully nothing's catching me out here. This is a new area, new territory for me. And so when this happens, this wholeness aspect of things, we start from there, we go back to there, we flow in and out of there. And the wholeness becomes aware of where something's not right, where something is out of balance. And I don't want to say not right, but let's say out of balance. There's too much of something in one spot. So it will send little pieces of itself out into these other dimensions, these other spaces, into what we refer to as an existence or a dimension. And as a result of that, it's kind of like saying, okay, I've got a whole bunch of darkness going on here. I need to send a little piece of light. I need to send a little piece of myself out into this space to help create the balance, to help keep things in its natural flow, right? In its natural fluidity, like water. So then what happens is, here we are in this wholeness, starting in here, and then we come along and we go into here, and we might go into here, and we might go into here. And I got these different aspects here, these different glasses here, because I think they're great examples of what happens. Now, as the divine says, okay, I'm going to give myself a little piece, you know, I'm going to send a piece of myself out there. Now, what the divine realizes, what the God energy realizes, again, whatever term you want to use, is that it hasn't lost any of its wholeness just because it sent a piece of itself someplace else, just because it sent an aspect of itself to exist through another container. So while it doesn't have to do this, it is part of the natural balance of doing this. So what happens then is it comes through an incarnation, and that's where we start to see life. We start to see animal life, we see human life, we see trees, we see all kinds of life forming. And yes, on one hand, this is a chain of cause and effects and things like that, but here again, it's all about this balance piece. So we come in and we incarnate. And sometimes maybe we incarnate and we come into a vessel that's all clear. It's very clear and it's very transparent and it's very easy to see through. And it has its shape and it has its form to it. And then sometimes we come in and the vessel that the divine presence comes through has no transparency, right? It's got some color to it, but it has no transparency to it. But even so, it might even have a little title to it. And then we have another type of vessel here. And this type of vessel, for example, is taller, it's thinner. But the thing that happens is when we do this incarnation, these pieces, even though the wholeness is there, they stop and they look around and they go, hey, where's the bigger piece of the wholeness that I do? And now they're in this container that is different than what they started from. And in this container, it starts to in some way shape them and shift them and form them, not changing the wholeness, but giving the illusion, giving the perception that they are this vessel or this container instead of the wholeness. And what happens is this wholeness is looking back at the wholeness and it's saying, oh no, I must not be part of the wholeness because I'm not here anymore. Because I can see here and I'm not in this, and that means I must not be whole. And this is where a lot of our issues come from. This is where a lot of our insecurities, the not enough syndrome, the buying into things. And then pretty soon we start buying into the concept that we're this package, or we're this package, or we're this package. And all of a sudden we're looking around saying, oh, you're not me, you're Mr. Green Glass over here, or you're Mr. Coffee Cup, or you're Miss, Clear Jug here. And all of a sudden we start seeing ourselves as different because we're in these different containers. And all of a sudden we start forgetting because we see the separation. And we start forgetting that we still are this wholeness. See, what is inside the container hasn't changed. Just like what's inside of us doesn't change. Our container takes on all these personality types. It takes on all these different shapes and forms and colors and designs. And sometimes those are very artistic. And sometimes there's some that look a lot like others. But inside, we're still the same. We're still the same thing inside. That hasn't changed. And some people will say, yeah, but the color of the glass, the shape, it will shift or shape it. It shifts or shapes the perception, but not what it really is. And so we go through life and all of a sudden we might do something like this and say, oh, you're coffee. And all of a sudden you start thinking, gee, for X amount of years everybody says I'm coffee, so I must be coffee, and I'm no longer wholeness. I'm no longer divine presence. And we buy into this label because we're in a non-transparent container. And that non-transparent container may not even allow us to see that we've become separated. But inside, if we really search inside, we know we're still whole. And this is where a lot of our division comes from. This is where a lot of racism comes from. This is where a lot of I'm better than, this level's higher than. And it's not true. It's all the same inside. But we have the illusion of separation. We have the illusion of the not good enough. We have the illusion of isolation. We have the illusion that we're something else. Again, because now what we're seeing is this container instead of experiencing the wholeness that we started from. But then what happens, right? What happens when all these little fragments go out and the balance gets created, and maybe even the balance swings in a different direction, and this wholeness says, hey, I don't need you to be over here anymore, and I don't need you to be over here anymore, and I don't need you in all these different packages, so I'm going to call you home. I'm going to call you home. And there's aspects here that the longer we spend in a container, and this is nothing against age, but the more time we spend in a container, the more we buy into that. But then also, the more we realize and we keep, because of the inner peace, which hasn't changed at all. It keeps saying, I'm not the container. I'm not the container. I'm not this. I'm what's inside of this. And so if we start to remember this in our own lives, when we look at people, when we go into different experiences, when we go through life, if we stop looking at people saying, oh, you're a brown person, or you're a black person, or you're a yellow person, or a red person, or whatever you are, you're not. We're all the same inside. We're all that piece of wholeness, that piece of divine, that spark. And when we talk about parallel existences and we talk about being in multiple dimensions, it's us split into all these different areas. So we're getting these multiple experiences, which is why people will have dreams. This is why they'll have visions. This is why they'll have deja vus. This is behind a lot of these different phenomena that's going on in the world. And so when the body has had enough, when the container starts breaking down, and that's the interesting piece with the physical, is that when it starts breaking down, and it could crack, and I'm not going to crack these because I don't want broken glass in nature, but when the container dissolves and the container goes away and the container says, okay, I can't hold you anymore. And this comes from a lot of different aspects of just because it is a third dimensional item, because it is the container is specific to the dimension that we're in. Just like our human body, it's specific to the dimension. It's the container which is housing our so-called water, our wholeness within it. And it says, I can't hold up anymore because I'm of this dimension. I'm not of your wholeness in a sense. In a sense it is, in a sense it's not. It functions on this dimension. It's grounded into this dimension. So when that happens, what's inside the container has to go somewhere, because it doesn't stop existing just because the container stops existing. So what does it do? It naturally will magnetize right back into where it came from. And so it gets this merging that happens, and everything goes right back into that very space. And so when we come back together, and this is why oftentimes on one hand we become aware of many more dimensions that we have going on, many more aspects that are happening, and many more parallel existences and selves, at the same time as we become more conscious and more aware that, hey, we're this wholeness, and that just because you're in an animal body or a plant body or a bench or or another human shape and form from what I am, that we're still this one piece. And as we develop that awareness and realize that we're not different, we're just under the illusion of being in all these containers. And that, here again, we're all the same thing, we're just splitting these different containers to help bring this balance in. And as we become aware of that, we start to see fewer and fewer pieces that are coming to us, as far as fewer splits and things, fewer diversity coming through. And it starts to harmonize in. Again, this container does not try to become this container, nor does it try to make this container its container. It just simply is a house to hold things in. So I'm hoping that clarifies it, and I hope that this will give a new understanding or shed a new light for you to help you remember we are all one. We're not different. We might be in a bunch of different containers, but we're just one. Hey, take care, everybody. I hope you have a great month, and I will see you around the next new moon time frame. And until then, I hope you all have a great month and a great lunar cycle that you pass through. This is Jessie on Nichols, George, and if you want to check out more of my work and the coding interpretation and things like that, you can do so on my website. And, you know, when we talk in mind, I want to throw one more thing in here. That if we look at the codes for God, God is all-encompassing. God is in everything. It's in the diverse polar opposites. And it's watching and it's observing. It's kind of like that secret mole that is able to be everywhere and connect with everyone. And so that is a great representation again, because when we look at all this diversity, God is within each and every one of those spaces. The divine presence is within each and every one of those spaces. So remember, you might not like the package that somebody comes in. You might not like the patterns that they're running on. That may not resonate for you. But remember, it's still the divine within. That hasn't changed. It's never going to change. And that is a constant. The only thing that's going to change is the way it manifests, the containers it comes through. Again, take care, everybody. I'll see you next month. And if you want to check out more of my work, you can do so at compassioncodes.com. See you later. Take care. Bye-bye.